So my name is Dr. JoJo Armendarez. I go by JoJo with the kids, and it's a lot easier to say sometimes, and they really kind of remember that. So today I'm going to talk about positive behavior supports in early childhood classrooms, but I wanted to open it up to all of you because I have a lot of slides and I had sent those out. So I don't know if kind of where you would want to touch on. There's a lot of different areas. These are based on presentations that I've given before in my training. If you look at this, positive behavioral management, behavioral expectations, those two go together. Pride skills, if anyone's heard of that. I don't know, has anyone heard of pride skills before?
Yes.
Okay, Brianna and Ronald have. Positive praise, rules, environment, social emotional skills, and then taking care of ourselves, which is something we always can do and work toward. So I just want to say this is where I started with infants and toddlers on the right. This was at infant toddler lab school when I was an undergrad at California State University. And spaghetti and paint, they mix so well and so much fun for them. So it's a nice photo for me to remember my start in training in this area as well. I just wanted to touch on this term discipline, and a lot of people don't realize that the word discipline actually comes from the Latin word to teach and to give instruction. And I just like to bring it back to when we discipline a child, it's all about imparting knowledge and teaching. Sometimes it gets a negative connotation and when we work with kids. Using positive discipline is just a way to model and teach expected behaviors. It gives more bang for your buck over time. So if you can just kind of practice this constantly and change the way we kind of work and our attitude sometimes, it's going to work for a majority of kids, different backgrounds, but it just does take practice and commitment. I know I came from a very Hispanic Latino household, so I used the word no a lot in my first interactions with kids, or I would say stop. And so I really had to say, oh my goodness. And my supervisor would always have to come and say, you're moving all over the place. Your energy is a lot. So I had to stop and breathe and really practice how I interacted. Like I said, when we work with kids, we have to take into a lot of factors, their background, the age, cognition. We know we work with 2-year-olds versus a 5-year-olds in different ways. Some kids are more socially emotional and mature than other kids. Some kids don't even know at 4 years the word, thank you. They're still working toward that in their repertoire. But most of the tools we go over today will work for most kids, but sometimes we do have to make slight modifications. And that's where a lot of your specialists, as you are, and other team members can really be helpful. I'm just putting this in here as a reminder. This is a handout for teaching mindfulness skills to certain age groups. And I like it because it really reminds us, again, different developmental levels, you're going to kind of modify what you're doing just as a reminder there for us. And then this website, The Brain Lady, there's a lot of good teaching tools there as well. So the general expectation, and this comes from the incredible teacher curriculum, which I really love for when we think about any interactions with young children, is like a pyramid. And in education, for some reason, they love using pyramids, but I think it really comes back to this idea of a base, right? When we really have a strong foundation of, there's a lot of play, you're modeling problem solving, you're really listening and talking. There's that strong base there. Other times you're going to be using some coaching. How many of you played sports when you were younger? I know I played baseball and football. I remember, yeah, Brianna did too. So having a good coach, you remember they were there guiding you. They weren't overly critical, right? Sometimes we have to use some critiques as in teaching, or sometimes our voice does go up, and that's okay. But if we have more of this strong base where there's celebrations, incentives, and then we go up in the pyramid, there's clear limits and rules. Also up at the top, we can use some redirections, and then at the very top is consequences. So if we're using those, timeouts or having to call parents a lot, a majority of our time, what happens is the pyramid flips and it becomes a wobbly pyramid. And so we want to really work from the strong base of having all of those factors here throughout the day. And I think most of you realize that, just kind of a reminder here. This one, if none of you have heard of the conscious discipline curriculum, this is another one I would love for you to have on your radar. The critical elements of when we work with kids, always remember having that eye contact. I mean, there are times where you're so busy with a lot of kids, your eyes are not on the kids all the time, you're kind of turned away. But what happens with eye contact for majority of kids is the idea of mirror neurons. And it really helps them connect with emotions on the face. I know it's hard with the mask right now, but so you're just giving a lot more smizing with your eyes, so smiling with those eyes. So then they really connect and be able to see what's going on in your face and kind of mirror that emotion as well. Just being as present as you can be, so fully enjoying the moment that you're in with them. Touch, a lot of times we need touch with young children on the shoulder, definitely some wiggles on the legs. I know I use a lot of that when I'm working with very young children. And then playfulness. I don't know if you realize, even when we do games as adults and young kids, dopamine is releasing in the brain, and that helps us pay attention and stay focused. So it's something we really want to remember, that by doing all of these, we're setting a tone and helping their brains develop as they get older. So, again, behaviors, we want to focus more on the positive. These are things I'm sure you realize as you're intervening with young children. Things we don't ever tolerate are physical and verbal aggression or destruction of property. But sometimes we can ignore wiggly bodies. I remember working with a teacher one time, and this kid with ADHD kept picking up a piece of a leaf, but they were listening, but they kept playing with the leaves on the floor when we were outside, and they kept always like, oh, but keep the leaves on the floor, eyes on the teacher. And at a certain point, we can kind of let those things go. And if you see the kiddo look up at the teacher, then you can say, oh wow, great looking up there, and pat on the back. So again, just trying to shift our perspective and kind of letting some things go, and letting them have some things that they might need. Standing versus sitting. Sometimes I think in your area, kids don't often sit, so that's good. But I know in kindergarten, they are making kids sit a lot more frequently. All right, so here we are to the fun pride skills. And I like the examples that they give here, so we can go through this. And it's just really a nice way to build that pyramid. And I use these a lot in my therapy. So I do a lot more behavior therapy and ABA in the homes and CBT, and I still use it in my cognitive behavioral therapy. They've served me so well. So, praise, making sure it's labeled. So everyone, thank you for coming today. Thanking you for your presence, the actual behavior that's going on. And so reflections too. I like it, when a kid says something, you're able to, say it back to them and kind of help them build on their vocabulary. So even young kids, they go, yellow, yellow. So they point, they're looking at something that's yellow, and you can say yellow slide. I see you're looking at the yellow slide. And so it really gives them a lot more vocabulary. Imitation, kids love this. You're the adult, you're getting down to their level, you're kind of modeling those behaviors. The descriptions, so, Stacy's head's right here looking down at me. You're just kind of that sportscaster. You're able to say, Ronald's a purple sweatshirt on, and I can see half of his face. You're just describing a lot of things going on in the environment. And then enjoyment, because kids pick up on that. And I know every day we can't bring our best energy, and that's okay. But sometimes I even try to stop and say, I'm going to put a little bit of smile on again with my eyes more. And I have to remember to put on the eye cream so that I don't get the wrinkles. But so just remembering to bring that presence and that enjoyment for kids, it's just going to build that better relationship over time. I want to go over this later, but praise, as I said, labeled praise, and then eye contact and proximity. So sometimes you're going to get more bang for your buck if you can be a little closer. And then even if you praise the effort, that's going to be great for the kiddos too. So they don't have to complete it. They can even just try. Reflection, just again, echo it back. I think this is one that I still use a lot in therapy. As with older kids, because that's part of what we do as a therapist. But with very young kids, I use this still quite a bit. And, it's like they hear themselves in your spoken voice, which is really awesome. Imitation, again, it's going to boost the child's self-esteem. You're modeling expected behaviors, right? So that is the biggest piece here. You're going to model what is expected in the environment, and you're showing them that this is good things that they're doing. Again, describing growth in vocab, good modeling of expected language, and then they get that recognition as well. So it kind of feels like a little bit of a praise in a sense too there. And enjoyment, again, remember that dopamine in the brain is releasing, and that's the same neurotransmitter that is so powerful when we eat chocolate, when we're in love. It's really there for all of those things, and it's really nice, and it's building that connection. Because later on we'll talk about there are times where you have to set limits and you have to be a little bit more firm. So if you have this piggy bank filled with all of these great moments, it's been a great day, you've had a really good weather day, it's not going to feel as harsh when you have to set a limit, and a kid might throw a big tantrum. If you have a full big piggy bank here of all these things that are supportive, you're not going to overdraw when you have to go there with the kiddo. And it's, we all have those moments where we have to set the limits for safety. So again, fill that piggy bank up. If you can share this with others, I think this is a great slide. It goes back to the rationale again. Why do we do this? Again, there's got to be a reason for this. For praise, appropriate behavior, we're increasing the specific behavior, and it's contributing to that warm interaction, right? And they give you some examples on here. But I think having a rationale, because sometimes when we say to do all of these things, they're going to kind of like say, it's hard, or this isn't how I learned it. Or, for me, remember, I was raised in an environment that didn't use a lot of these things, that focused a lot more on the negative behaviors for me. So I really had to remember this is why we're doing this. Now, try this. So I don't know if anyone has anyone actually tried to count how many behavior descriptions or reflections or labeled praises you've done? But it's good practice to keep up with it. So recalibrate. Am I hitting on 10 behavior descriptions, 10 reflections, 10 labeled praises in 5 minutes? Sometimes what we do, we have a tendency when we work with kids is to kind of ask questions a lot. And so again, we'll talk about that, but questions aren't part of behavior descriptions. It's kind of you being the teacher. And I know as interventionists, you kind of have to do that sometimes, but if you can do some descriptions in there and reflections more frequently, that's great. The labeled praises, once you got it, I think it's really easy, because when kids come to sit down, you can just easily, thank you for sitting down. Thank you for eyes watching. Oh, thank you for ears listening. Those are pretty easy to, fit those in there. And I really do try to switch it up. I say, fantastic. I mix it up a little. Fantastical. One kid liked a bear show one time. So I go, that's, bear-tastic working, so there's fun little ways that you can do that. Has anyone tried to mix that up with kiddos? Any examples of that? Yeah, Brianna, what did you say with kids and kind of, instead of just saying thank you?
I guess it varies on the type of children. It's been a little while since I've been full-blown in the classroom, but I'll kind of just base it off their personalities a little bit. And, pointing out more like, wow, you super did that kind of thing. Like, look at you.
Yeah. And then that's great. And then just, again, you carry it over into what they did. So you super did the problem, or you super did that toy, just again, bringing it back there. And that's the piece where I always try to remember too, is like, oh, you're giving them more language, you're giving them more words. But, we can talk a little bit later in question and answers. If, you have kids with autism, sometimes that might look a little different in how you structure that language. So more on praise, as I said. So think about how, and this is great, Brianna, that you said this right now. So think about how we reinforce adults, or even how we praise. So imagine you walk into a restaurant and someone holds the door for you. What do you say to them? Thank you. Stacy?
Thank
Yeah.
you for holding the door.
Well, that's ideal. Stacy, do you actually do that though?
Not always.
I know. Yeah, I tried it. Yeah, that's exactly what we'd want to say, but I've been trying to do it, but sometimes it feels, I get looks from other adults when I do say, thank you for holding the door. And they look at me like, what are you talking? They don't hear that a lot. So labeled praise can at first feel very uncomfortable for us as adults, but for kids, it's so magical. It's just a different way that they hear things. It takes that moment of, you're really focusing on the things that they did. So I love that. And then behaviors are always things that you just see. So you're just describing what is happening. And that's really nice that you can just kind of focus on, thanks for keeping your legs still right now. Thanks for being in your area, the body's in the area, things like that. Again, back to this labeled praise, the reason why we do it. An example, you did great concentrating on building the garage, the toy garage there. And even having symbols associated with it. Has that something you've been using, Stacy?
Yes.
Yeah. So pairing it with that, and sometimes what's lovely about this is that you can just hold up the symbol and they kind of recognize it there. And you can kind of vary when you use more labeled praise with verbal versus labeled praise with verbal and a photo icon. So it's kind of nice. It gives you repertoire. Another little fun worksheet that I like to reference. So again, building on that, insert the labeled praise in some of these so you can kind of have more ideas. Some of these can be put up in your classroom so teachers can see that. And remember, you're doing very well with keeping your legs still. Look how well you did that picture. Great job trying to, good effort on that one. And just things to remind you to keep using these and examples there. Basically, remembering to label it, it has to be immediate. So think about if Stacy, you track down the lady or the person who held the door for you 5 minutes later and said, thank you for holding the door. What do you think they would say to you?
What?
Yeah, right. They would just say, oh my goodness, what are you talking about? Like, so same thing with kids and young kids, especially within 10 to 15 seconds, that's kind of already out of their mind. They're on to the next toy, the next moment. And then that eye contact or, close proximity if you can. If you've never done this one is a very fun one. As interventionists, when you're working in a classroom, see how many labeled praises happen in a classroom versus the amount of maybe there's a stay in your seat, or like a critique of the child's behavior, or they say, oh, get back in line. A lot of commands. All right, now sit down, everybody. Those are commands that we're giving to kids. But let's see how many times they're being verbally praised. And if you have 5 more verbal praises for every command or critique on a kid, that's kind of where the environment will shift. And so you want to see if there's that many labeled praises to every critique. And I've been in places where it seems more, all right, everyone sit down, look up here, do this activity now, okay. And so it becomes more of a place where it doesn't feel as fun, and then a lot more behavior problems might happen. So do it. Check to see if there's a 5 labeled praises to every 1 critique or every command that happens. And commands are those factors of, no, don't, stop, quit. And those happen from time to time, when kids are hitting each other. If it's something, so teachers might say, stop, hands down. And that's a command because we're talking about safety here. And those things happen for young kids. But if we can put back some labeled praise and positives in the environment, it's going to bode well for the entire classroom. And again, you can even notice as their body calms, or other kids that are still focused on the toys and the activities there. This one I think is really important because research is clear that the students with behavioral problems, and we all have had, raise your hand if you can remember a student with a behavioral problem. Stacy. Yeah, Ronald. They're the ones who need the most praise, but they receive significantly less praise. It's a lot easier for those kids to get the attention for the behavior problems. So you could even do an analysis on the child with, some more phone calls to home. How many praises are they getting per every 10-minute interval, in the day, or, go in there and do an observation. And then that's a nice way to work with a teacher to say, look at this amount of praises for this child compared to this child. And so you can kind of show there's something's off here. How can we get this kid's praise up a lot more, and kind of set the goals to work with data there. Another thing why it's really nice to remember to praise the behavior, the effort, because I don't know how low this research goes, but as kids get older, kids with lower self-esteem, if you praise their internal characteristics, like you're so smart, you're really, really handsome or pretty, you're very pretty, it actually can do the opposite and decrease the self-esteem. So it can just go back and praise effort, the process, what the behavior is. Think about if somebody said, you're so smart, like it doesn't have the same feel of like you're doing the effort and the things in your life that are really making you an adult that's doing great things. I talked a little bit about this. Commands happen in a classroom, even as intervention specialists, you use these a lot. I know that I try to vary my commands and make them not as frequent, right? So trying to see how you can get kids to come sit down without having to do a command, kind of say, all right, it's time for circle time. So if you're saying it's time for circle time, it's not a direct command. And that's something that you can look at, but also trying to remember how your tone of voice is, and then also giving time for the response. I think those are two big ones here. If you have a kid who is 2 years old or 3 years old, you're going to need to give a little bit more time, to say, okay, Jojo, sit down here, right here. You're probably going to want to give about 10 to 15 seconds and make sure that the command you gave was close, that it was specific. Sit here on the X, or sit here on the circle, so that it is really easy and that you don't have to keep repeating the command. So if you repeat the command a lot, that's actually going to, remember, put more things back in the environment that you want to up the praises for, bring back the positive things in the environment. Because commands actually, here's a question for everyone. When you command somebody, who's in charge? But when we give commands, who is the person in charge there? That's always something I remember. We are. And if the more you can, yeah. So the more we can make it that kids have some options. I like giving options all the time for kids. I think that works really well. If you can say like, come, it's all time to sit down at our chairs for intervention time, or something like that. So it's not a command that's, Johnny, sit down on the chair. Samantha, sit down in the chair. Maria, sit down here. Sometimes that happens, but then bring it back with some more labeled praises. And we'll talk about that right now. And then questions. This one took me 3 years to get out of my system. How many of you still ask questions as a command? I still do it sometimes.
Yes.
That one is very hard and very confusing for kids. Can you come sit down? As adults, we can say that, oh, Sherry, can you unmute yourself? That's that's a question. And Sherry, you don't need to do that right now. But you don't need to. But that was an example of a question there, right, Sherry? Where you could actually say no to me. So you could say, no, I don't need to, I'm not going to unmute, right? But for young kids, being direct as possible. So Sherry, please unmute yourself, or Sherry, please mute yourself. And then after that, you would say, thank you for unmuting yourself. And so I really like that when you give commands, if you're going to use them, you want to make them specific and make it a teachable moment. And this is a really good one. Has anyone seen this before? So teachers really like this. So when you tell them, again, remember I told you that I had a trouble with this when I used to say, don't run. So I would like this as a model to say, use walking feet, and then really nice positive descriptive acknowledgements. So you walked across the classroom and you made a safe choice. So giving the language to the teachers and then challenging them each day to practice some of these, because it takes time to put this into your repertoire in your language. Because these aren't normal things. As Stacy said, we want to always say thank you for holding the door when we go into a restaurant, but a lot of times we just say thank you. And that's just kind of how we are as adults. But this might be a really nice one, and I can send you the link to this here or as a document so you can have that.
Our teachers are trained in this for the classrooms
Perfect.
As well
have
as
you-
the parents.
as
Yes.
well as the parents.
There is
Yes,
a parent handout on this. Have you used this
Yes.
as well?
we do.
Good,
We do use them for classroom and the home.
good. I had a feeling you would already know about this. Have you used the Incredible Years teacher handouts?
Not in a long time.
Yeah, so these are nice to go
Yes.
back to. They have some nice ones for the refrigerators. But for teachers, like I had mentioned too, when I did this with young kids, some of my tone would go up a little higher, my energy level would be higher. So it is really tough for us to see ourselves and our own behaviors. So going back to teachers and saying, would you like some feedback on the tone? This is something that is really hard to get down, and then, practicing it with people as well. So even, let's put the toys away. That if you go up at the very end, can sound like a question, or like, play quietly, and so you have to say play quietly. So you kind of go down at the end of the word there, at the last word in the command. So you don't want it to sound like a question. So just kind of doing that there. Does that make sense? And
Absolutely. Yes.
okay. And that's something that I think all teachers and therapists can work toward. It's a really hard piece. I almost feel like we need to have voice lessons or voice coaching, so we get that down. And then this is, again, we talked about this. This is another one. When you work with teachers, are they praising after the child did the command? So you say, hand me the toy. Check. Do the teachers, thank you for handing me the toy? And it's immediate right after they do it. That one is really an important one, because if you ask a kid and you give a command to do something, that is a big piece. You want to acknowledge it, you want to thank them, and you're giving them the language to follow up with it. All of you are probably familiar with the PREMAC principle. So again, when you finish cleaning up the toys here, then you can go to the next toy. So trying to model those expectations. And then this inventory, I really like this one too, but having a piece to kind of rate how teachers are doing things in the classroom is really nice. Do you already have something set up like this?
Mhm.
Good.
Yes.
Good. Just always to go back to this. These are the things that can get missed sometimes. Just really nice to reflect on it. This one, I don't know if you've seen this, but I love the photos in this. Teachers really like this as well. It gives you them, again, those descriptions and photos of why they should be doing certain things. And I always bring this one up because I know no teacher does this, but there are times where as the teachers, we might be thinking this, again, based on our own backgrounds, or we've heard things like this from our parents. And I think that's nice to talk with teachers about, again, these criticizing factors. I know I've never heard anything like this in my experience with other professionals, but that's happened to us as children and in our environment sometimes. So it's a good place to talk about, you're acting like a baby, or that's not how you do it. So I don't hear that much as a lot, but sometimes even in our body language, we might come off as a we might be seeming to criticize. And then again, avoiding commands when possible and asking questions, because if you ask questions, it really doesn't allow the child to lead. And ignoring goes back to that piece, focusing on the positives and just kind of letting those little things go away. Sometimes kids are learning these things, and the best way to learn how to socially interact is to focus on the positives. How many of your classes already have the visual expectations of the rules?
Just about all of them. Yeah.
All right, perfect. I'll skip over
You
this.
got some new graphics with your pride information. Huh?
Oh, good.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's been
Good.
updated, huh?
Yeah, this one?
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you're able to see
A
something
lot
new
of
there.
visuals. Yeah.
Yeah, the visuals, I think they work really well for the adults too. And
Okay.
it's a fun one to see and reminder to use these. But I will say back to the pride skills, if teachers aren't being rated on them and actually coached to meet a certain goal, it gets really hard to kind of practice these and implement them every day. So maybe even having a discussion of like, could we work on this to try to increase your praises more? Or, they're not describing things a lot more. So again, once you have more of these, behaviors in general go down. So we have these. One thing, I don't know if teachers are using these. I really like this because remember back to the nonverbal or the visual cue, you can do be respectful, follow directions, work quietly, look, listen, and pay attention. And so if you're using these frequently and you kind of have them already paired with a hand gesture, you can turn it into games, and you can do it fast, be respectful, look, listen, pay attention, and do it very, very fast or go slow. And it becomes this way of them remembering all of the kind of rules in the classroom. Again, back to that conscious discipline. There is a really cool picture cue cards so they can teach kids. I don't know if you can see this here, choice to be helpful. It tells them what they can do. And then there's a little X on, again, what we don't do. It's a nice teaching moment where you can use the, we don't do this, but here's what you can choose to do. The area is also another teacher. Is something I want to talk to you about is what do you think is wrong with the photo up here at the top versus the one at the bottom if this is for 4 to 5 year olds? What do you notice about that? And I think most of you kind of can already see the issue there.
The top don't look too fun.
Doesn't look too fun. And what does that almost look like? A nice area to do what in?
The old training room.
Yeah, it looks like a training.
Space
Yeah.
to run.
Yeah, good place to run. So thinking of your environment as another teacher is always really helpful. If you're noticing kids are climbing on certain things, what are they trying to get to? So maybe making that accessible, having a photo icon there so they can request that. So maybe tracking how many times are teachers saying keep your feet down, or put that down on the floor, and then seeing if there's a way you can modify the environment so there's antecedent control, so you're kind of taking away that from the kiddos and allowing them to make better choices. And then being very explicit about the environment. So most kids, you don't kind of teach about the environment. So, all the kids we're gonna go learn where the bathroom is. 1 foot over here, we're going to the bathroom. So, doing a little song. I'm sorry, making this up as I go. But having it as a fun game, or we're gonna leapfrog to the bathroom. This is where our bathroom is. And then, making it a fun game to teach it about the environment to the kids. Because if you don't do that and you would just expect kids to know where things are, remember some kids don't have a bathroom that's in a certain location, or sometimes they share a bathroom with other families. So remembering to keep that in mind as well. Again, going back to our checklist and having a way to kind of say how the environment is going to pay off in the long run. I don't know if any teachers use a visual schedule that's hanging off their side. That's nice. Or even having these other visuals. I think you said you already have that. But again, remembering to make them clear. Another reminder to use visuals. I know that you do that as well. And has anyone heard of the Pomodoro technique? Okay. Breaking activities into smaller, manageable parts. I know this is a big thing for older kids, but can work for young kids as well. And here's an example of this. So in the beginning of Larina's day, she's doing a brain smart start, for example. And that's, they do deep breaths. And then they might do an activity, and this could be modified for your kids. So then you do a 10-minute center with a kiddo, and then an alarm goes off, and then they get another little break. So we're gonna do a wiggle break, got our wiggle music on, and then you transition to the next activity, next center. We're going to the next center, and so then they get to play for about 10 more minutes, and then they get another little wiggle break or a touch the head, shoulders, wiggle, wiggle, and all of that. Little breaks throughout the day can make the day transition a little easier sometimes. So thinking about ways you can have more stretch breaks or even kind of a freeze break, and just kind of taking a moment there to help them focus. This technique actually works really well for kids with ADHD and even adults with ADHD. How many of you have unfortunately sat for 3 or 4 hours and done a paper or to meet a deadline? It happens. So, you know, for me, I try to work in 20-minute intervals, and it can just be like I get up for a minute and stretch or think about what I did or what am I going to do next. And what social emotional curriculum are you using in your centers, or is there one that you've chosen or currently use?
Teaching pyramid. Is
What
that
is
the
it called?
teaching pyramid?
Mhm.
Is that the one? Yeah,
Teaching
that's for our
pyramid.
behavior. Mhm.
Okay. I haven't heard of that one. I'll have to check it out. One that I used to use is Second Step, and they had a lot of puppets. But I think most of them are all the same. I've used Path's curriculum before. They all tend to use puppets or characters because, again, that's developmentally appropriate. So whatever you're using, it's nice. For your older kids, this might be a fun, because your kids, what age, how old do they go up to? About 5 or 6? This might be a 5. This might be a fun activity to teach about when we're really angry. And there's a nice book that goes along with this called The Soda Pop Kid. And you can say, as we build our emotions and things happen, we get really angry. You get the Diet Coke and you start saying, oh, someone took my toy. Oh, they cut in front of me. Oh, you know, and you're putting the Mentos in there, and all of a sudden the Mento or the Diet Coke will explode. And you talk about the feelings. That's what our bodies feel like. So how can we calm our bodies down? And so that's where you say you want to start adding in some of the coping skills, so the explosion of the Diet Coke isn't as big, and you kind of pour water in there and say, these are our breathing, these are our talking with our teacher. And so you put the Mentos back in there again, and you say, look, it doesn't explode as big. And so it's a nice visual for teaching feelings and good activity. But also make sure to have an adult put the Mentos in there, and that you're not doing it in the classroom. So I usually do this one outside, or there's like a big bucket underneath it. Another visual representation of feelings. It's a nice thing to have in the classroom. And I always say to parents and to teachers, you have to name the feeling before you tame it. So kids should be leaving Head Start knowing the basic Sesame Street feelings, and start to use iMessages. As teachers use that more frequently, I think kids will kind of eventually pick it up, but they won't be proficient in that, right? Here's my cousin Alex, who lives in Mexicali, Mexico, and I just love this photo of him. And I never got the backstory on this, but I think it's a fun photo. If families want to bring in photos of their kids, if they can show some of the faces, I think it's a nice visual reminder of all of the emotions we have in the classroom. And then here's teaching pyramid. Is this the one you said you use? Okay, so I had pulled from there before, and I really liked their visuals here. I haven't used it, but I just pulled for this presentation. So they have some good visuals there you can use for teaching. PBIS Rewards has a lot of good charts or other things you can use for your classroom. That's another one you can pull from as well. And how many of you have heard of Cosmic Kids Yoga? Good. The one that I really like using too, that the icons here at the bottom, is the balloon breathing. And this comes from the conscious discipline resource as well. So you put your hands on your head. We got to fill up our balloon in our tummy. Everybody fill it up. And so you take a deep breath in and blow it out. So that's a fun way for kids to do that. Maybe not during COVID times, a lot of spit and other things going out. So there's other ones that they have. Yeah, so those are good. I won't go through this because I think you kind of got the idea that we teach these as well. Here's a quote that I wanted to touch on here is children aren't coloring books. You don't get to fill them with your favorite color. So every kid is going to be unique and kind of do things at their own time. We really have to respect that. But it's something to always think about as adults. Last thing I wanted to touch on is taking care of ourselves. This is one that I'm still on a continual journey with, and I have to be honest with you, it's tough. It's tough to fit in these things and self-care for ourselves, but I remember thinking, how am I going to go through my back-to-back therapies today, do this presentation today, other things that I have to do as commitments without actually taking time to, make sure I'm okay. So fill up our piggy banks as adults, have the dinner with your significant other, partners, friends, build those relationships throughout the day. It's really, we have to be there to support each other. Sleep, try to get 7 to 8 hours. How many of you got 7 hours last night? You don't have to tell me. I did. It was hard. I kept wanting to watch an episode of my favorite show, but I was like, I got to go to bed. I got to be up here for the presentation, eating, find a good balance. But we can have our chips from time to time. I've had to cut out hot Cheetos, to be honest with everybody. We all have those things that we have to cut out because on the long run, they're not great for us. Exercise, that's something we got to do. Even walking outside every day is going to be great for us. Because keeping up with kids, as we know, that does count as exercise too. Those relationships, mindfulness, spirituality, religion, there's so much evidence about that piece too. So taking time to pray, taking time to just focus, even 10 minutes, 5 minutes can do so much for your lives. Therapy or counseling, so when you need that in your life. I'm a therapist and I go see my own therapist. So I wanted to say that and let you know that I need that for me and my support, and it really helps me. Some people say talking to a priest or to the pastor or to someone that they really confide in can be therapy for them too. Body scans, this one is very important for me right now. I just took a look at my body too. This is a nice reminder for me. Even how teachers might stand. Has anyone seen a teacher have a very hands on their hips, or they're just kind of look very tense? Kids pick up on those cues. So, telling teachers to check in with their body and kind of relax. And, the more we practice this, the better we get at it too. I won't go through this here, but for young kids, this can be good. But for us too, we need to do some progressive muscle relaxation. So pulling your shoulders up and holding them and then letting them go. The one I really like now, and for all of you, we do a lot of typing, right? Or we all do that. So if you put your arms up and you pull back a little bit, pull back a little, hold it, hold it, hold it, pull back a little further, and then let it down. So you should feel a little bit of the stretch in your shoulder blades. And so those are really nice things to keep us moving and our bodies and thinking our bodies there. Positive coping statements. This child is not trying to give me a hard time. They're just going through a hard time. That's when I try to remember when I hear or I see big tantrums or big blowouts. In the end, everything's okay. So something's not okay. It's not the end. Like you could have had the worst day. Things just fell apart. You had a kid go through 5 meltdowns. Your intervention plan didn't work. You get a call about something in your family. Again, it's not the end. We got to just keep going and we got to be there for our kids in the long run. So just fill each other's buckets. You can't pour from an empty cup. So you got to take care of yourselves is also part of behavior management. And then this site too, I can send that along, has a lot of good examples for templates, but just to review again, positive behavioral management, working from that base of the pyramid to have a solid expectation of behaviors and care and in love and environment, not as much questions or commands, trying to flip the script on how we work with kids. Behavioral expectations are clear and they're taught. Your environment is another teacher, so going through periodically and noticing how the environment is another piece in that, the puzzle there. And then our teaching mood and self-regulation to kids and for ourselves is really helpful. Where does all this information come from? So as a lot of you saw, some of the conscious discipline, incredible years, curriculum, and those pride skills from PCIT. I pulled from that, but I also got a lot of this from working through clinic and hospital settings, working with young children across these areas, through a summer camp in Miami, Florida. This was a class, 15 kids all had ADHD and other behavior disorders. So imagine having, those 1 or 2, 3 kids, but just a classroom full of those kids that are the most challenging. And again, we had to get trained on, can you do those pride skills in that certain 5-minute period? And it's helped me in the long run so much. I really appreciate this experience. And then they had a good summer. And these were kids, a lot of them had been kicked out of preschools. So none of them got kicked out. That was the goal. They were there for that reason. And I think it really changed maybe their lives in the long run. I also mentioned earlier, I went to Cal State San Bernardino. That's where I did my undergrad in child development and psychology. And then I earned my PhD at the University of Rhode Island in school psychology. So I'm also a credentialed school psychologist. And now I'm working toward being a licensed clinical psychologist. So there's me when I was little. And to tell you the truth, I was a handful. And I think that's why I heard a lot of those, no, stop, don't do that. And my brother was kind of a little bit calmer, but definitely was the hyperactive kid. But my mom always valued that, and it's really helped me get to where I am today. And I want to end on this quote that people are just as wonderful as sunsets if you let them be. When I look at a sunset, I don't find myself saying, soften the orange a bit on the right-hand corner. I don't try to control a sunset. I watch with awe as it unfolds. So thank you.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was founded in 1998 with the promise to reduce and prevent the disabilities that can be associated with autism and other neurodevelopmental conditions. Every day, our clinicians and researchers make progress on that promise. Our groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other conditions associated with disability are helping affected individuals achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website or our social media platforms to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.